I still remember the way the church smelled that morning in 1985. Fresh lilies lined the aisle, sunlight spilled through the stained glass windows, and every seat was filled with the faces of people I loved. Everyone was waiting for her, Emily Rhodes, the only woman I had ever loved, the woman who had said yes to me under that old maple tree, the woman who was supposed to walk through those doors and become my wife. But she never came. That moment changed me forever. I was 25 years old, full of hope, nerves, and excitement. I thought I had it all figured out. Emily was the girl everyone said was out of my league. She had this way of making a room stop when she laughed, this confidence that pulled people in. And somehow she loved me, or at least that's what I believed. We met in college. I was the quiet one in the back of the lecture hall, the guy scribbling notes no one would ever borrow. She was the one answering questions, unafraid, smiling like the world was hers to take. Somehow she noticed me. Somehow she sat beside me one day and said, "You always look like you know the answers. Help me pass this class?" That's how it started. Fast forward a few years, and there I was, standing at the altar waiting for her. My hands were trembling, my suit collar felt too tight, and I kept glancing at the doors, expecting them to swing open any second. Beside me sat my family. My mother, Margaret, was clutching her pearls so tightly I thought they'd snap. She had always been protective of me. When I first brought Emily home, Mom pulled me aside and whispered, "Danny, she's a firecracker. Just make sure you don't get burned." But she warmed up to her. She saw how happy Emily made me, and that morning she looked just as eager as I was to welcome her into the family. My father, James, was a man of few words, but when I told him I was proposing, he gave me one of his rare approving nods. That was his way of saying he was proud. He sat in the second pew, jaw clenched, his weathered hands folded. He believed in marriage the way he believed in hard work. Once you commit, you don't quit. And then there was my kid brother, David. Always the joker, always trying to lighten the mood. He leaned toward me before the ceremony started and whispered, "Hey, if she changes her mind, I'll marry you. I hear I'm the better-looking Carter anyway." I rolled my eyes, but it made me laugh, and for a second I forgot how nervous I was. But then the laughter faded. The minutes kept passing. The pianist looped the same melody, trying to cover the growing silence. Guests started whispering, shifting in their seats. My mother leaned over and said softly, "She's probably just running late." My father shook his head. He didn't say anything, but his eyes told me the truth. No bride takes this long. I stood there for an hour, waiting. An hour that felt like a lifetime, and she never came. No note, no phone call, just absence. The shame was unbearable. I walked down that aisle alone, not as a husband, but as a man abandoned in front of everyone he knew. Whispers followed me out the door like shadows. My brother tried to put a hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged it off. My chest was burning. My heart was breaking in real time. I never got an explanation. Not that day, not that year, not in the decades that followed. Emily disappeared from my life as quickly as she had entered it, leaving only questions that I was too scared to ask. But 40 years later, when my hair had gone gray, when the boy she left behind was long gone, my phone rang, and it was her, Emily Rhodes, the woman who had broken me, apologizing after a lifetime of silence. And do you know what I told her? "The man you left isn't here anymore. My name is Daniel Carter, and if you met me today, you'd probably think I've lived a quiet, ordinary life." At 65, I spend my mornings reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, my afternoons tending to a modest garden, and my evenings listening to the old records my father left me. People in my neighborhood see me as the dependable type, the man who waves from his porch, the man who never remarried, the man who seems content with solitude. But contentment is just a mask. Behind it is a story that shaped every decision I've ever made. To understand what happened to me, you need to know who I was before everything fell apart. In 1985, I was 25 years old, fresh out of college and eager to carve out a life of my own. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a small brick house with a picket fence my father built with his own hands. We weren't rich, but we had enough. My mother, Margaret, worked as a nurse, and she had the kind of heart that could heal people with her presence. My father, James, was a machinist, hardworking, stoic, and the kind of man who believed a man's word was his bond. And then there was my younger brother, David, 4 years behind me, full of jokes and reckless energy. Our family dinners were always noisy, Mom telling us about the patients she cared for, Dad reminding us to finish what you start, and David making us laugh until milk came out of my nose. In that home, love wasn't something we talked about much. It was something we showed through hard work, loyalty, and showing up for one another. Then came Emily Rhodes. I met her in my junior year of college. She was studying literature, I was buried in economics, and our worlds shouldn't have collided. But they did. Emily had this presence about her, confident but warm, the kind of person who remembered everyone's name and made you feel like you mattered when she spoke to you. She was the complete opposite of me. Where I was cautious, she was bold. Where I thought 3 steps ahead, she lived for the moment. The first time I brought her home for Sunday dinner, my family reacted exactly as I expected. David leaned over and whispered, "She's way out of your league, Danny. Don't screw this up." Mom gave her that nurse's smile she used on nervous patients, and Dad sat back in his chair, observing her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. After dinner, when Emily had gone home, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "She's beautiful," she said, "but fiery. You sure she's the one?" I didn't hesitate. "She's it, Mom. She's the one." It wasn't long before Emily became part of our routine. She helped Mom cook on weekends, debated books with Dad, and teased David relentlessly. Even my father, a man who rarely gave compliments, once said, "She's strong-willed, Daniel. You'll never get bored with her." For the first time, I felt like my life was unfolding exactly the way it was supposed to. Emily and I had our differences. Of course we did. I was steady and serious. She was impulsive, sometimes unpredictable, but I loved that about her. She made me feel alive in ways I didn't know I could. I can still hear her voice saying, "Danny, you think too much. Just breathe. Just live." By the spring of 1985, I knew I couldn't imagine a future without her. That's when I decided to propose. I didn't pick a fancy restaurant or an expensive ring. That wasn't us. Instead, I took her to the place where it all began, the maple tree near campus, where she'd first asked me for help with class notes. I told her, "Emily, I may not have all the answers, but I know one thing. I want to spend every day finding them with you." She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." That moment lit up my world. My family celebrated with us, friends cheered us on, and for the first time, I believed in destiny. I believed that everything, every quiet night, every family lesson, every step of my life, had led me to her. If you had asked me then, I would have told you I was the luckiest man alive. I had my family's blessing, the love of a woman who made me better, and a future I could see so clearly it felt tangible. What I didn't know was that fate had other plans. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from. My mother was sewing ribbons for the pews. My father was polishing his shoes as if he were preparing for an inspection. And my brother David, well, he was too busy sneaking champagne from the fridge to be of any help. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. Everyone believed Emily and I were destined. I still remember the night before the wedding. Emily and I sat on the porch swing outside her parents' house. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Danny, are you nervous?" I laughed. "Of course. What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows?" She nudged me playfully. "You won't. And even if you did, I'd still marry you." Her words sank into me like sunlight. At that moment, there was not a shred of doubt in my mind that she would be waiting at the altar. But when the morning came, things started to unravel. The church was decorated in white lilies and baby's breath, the way Emily had always said she wanted it. My mother was adjusting the veil on the flower girl. My father was shaking hands with guests, nodding in his usual quiet way. David was pacing around like the unofficial master of ceremonies, making jokes to anyone who would listen. And me? I was standing at the front, heart racing, palms sweating through my gloves. I kept glancing at the door. Any minute now, I told myself. Any minute. The pianist began playing softly. Guests shifted in their seats. My mother whispered to me, "She's going to be stunning, Danny. Just wait." Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. David walked up and whispered, "Hey, maybe she's stuck in traffic." His grin didn't hide the worry in his eyes. The priest leaned toward me and asked quietly, "Do you want us to wait a little longer?" I nodded. "Just a little. She'll be here." But with each passing minute, the tension grew heavier. The pianist looped the same tune over and over, until the melody turned from beautiful to suffocating. Guests started murmuring, exchanging looks. Some pretended to smile at me reassuringly, but others didn't bother hiding their confusion. My mother's face shifted from eager to strained. She whispered, "She wouldn't do this to you. She's probably fixing her dress." My father, sitting stone-faced, finally muttered, "Nobody's this late, son." I wanted to believe my mother. I wanted to believe Emily was just delayed. But deep down, a gnawing dread was spreading in my chest. An hour passed. The doors never opened. The whispers turned into silence. A silence so heavy it crushed me. Finally, the priest cleared his throat and said softly, "Daniel, perhaps we should—" I didn't let him finish. I stepped down from the altar, my legs trembling. My brother reached for my arm, but I shook him off. I felt exposed, humiliated, like the entire church was staring at me, not as a groom, but as a fool. Outside the church, the sunlight was blinding. My tie felt like it was choking me. I ripped it off, tossed it on the ground, and leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. David followed me out. "Danny, hey, maybe something happened. Maybe there's an emergency." I shook my head. "No, she's gone." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when he saw my face. The ride home was silent. My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, whispering prayers under her breath. My father drove with one hand on the wheel, the other clenched tight against his thigh. David sat in the back with me, fidgeting, desperate to say something but wise enough to stay quiet. That night I sat in my room, staring at the engagement ring. I replayed every moment of our relationship in my head. The dinners with my family, the late-night talks, the promises under the maple tree. Had it all been a lie? No call? No note? No explanation? The woman who had said yes, 1,000 times yes, had vanished without a goodbye. And in the silence of that empty room, shame and heartbreak pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. My father's words echoed in my head. "Finish what you start." But I hadn't finished anything. I had been abandoned before the story could even begin. That was the day I stopped believing in happy endings. The days after the wedding felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. The decorations were still in boxes. The uneaten cake sat in my parents' refrigerator, and my suit hung in the closet, taunting me like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. People whispered about me at the grocery store. Friends who had once slapped me on the back now looked at me with pity in their eyes. I couldn't stand it. For a while, my mother tried to comfort me. "Danny, love doesn't vanish overnight," she said softly one evening, her hands on mine. But I pulled away. What did she know about being left at the altar? My father was less gentle. "Son," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, "life's not fair. You got knocked down, now you stand up." But I didn't stand up, not then. Instead, I buried myself in work. I took every overtime shift, every project, anything that kept my mind from wandering back to Emily. My brother David tried to pull me out of the darkness. He'd drag me to bars, try to set me up with women he claimed were the one. But each time, I sat there, stiff and unresponsive, comparing them to the ghost of Emily. Eventually, he stopped trying. Years passed. The phone never rang. No letter, no explanation, not even a rumor about where she'd gone. It was like she had vanished from the earth. And so, I built a shell around myself. I learned to live without asking questions. I watched my brother marry, have kids, and start a family of his own. I watched my parents grow old and frail. I sat at Thanksgiving tables with cousins and neighbors, smiling politely, dodging questions about why I never settled down. Just didn't meet the right one, I'd say, though we all knew the truth. I wasn't waiting for Emily anymore. I just wasn't willing to risk loving anyone again. By the time I hit my 60s, I had grown used to solitude. I had routines that filled the silence: gardening, books, late-night television. I told myself it was enough. Some nights, it even felt true. And then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening. I was chopping vegetables for dinner when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but for some reason, I answered. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in 40 years said, "Danny, it's me, Emily." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My grip tightened on the phone. My knees went weak. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "Emily?" I whispered. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. I don't expect you to forgive me. I couldn't live another day without saying I'm sorry." Her words hit me like a train. 40 years of silence broken by 3 words. I'm sorry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't come, why she hadn't called, why she had destroyed me without explanation. But instead, I sat there, numb, listening as she poured out her confession. She told me she had been terrified back then, that her parents pressured her to marry someone more stable, someone who could provide a life she didn't think I could, that she panicked on the wedding day, convinced she was making a mistake, and fled without looking back. She said she regretted it every single day since. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I was a coward, and I can't die without telling you the truth." Her words cracked something inside me, but not in the way she probably hoped. I realized, in that moment, that the young man who had once waited at the altar had died long ago. 40 years of silence had changed me. Her apology couldn't bring him back. My voice was steady when I finally spoke. "The man you left," I said, "isn't here anymore." There was silence on the line. I could hear her sobbing quietly, trying to catch her breath. "Danny, please say something else." But I didn't. For once, I didn't owe her anything, and that was the turning point. When I hung up the phone that night, my hands were shaking. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, listening to the silence of my house. For 40 years, I had imagined what I'd say if I ever saw Emily again. Sometimes in those daydreams, I begged her to explain. Other times, I shouted at her, demanding justice for what she stole from me. But in every version, I was still the young man waiting at the altar. That man was gone now. A week later, I agreed to meet her. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe the part of me that needed to see her face again, to confirm that she was real and not just a ghost from my past. We met at a small cafe in town. I arrived first, sat in the corner booth, and waited. I told myself I was calm, that this was just a conversation. But when the door opened and I saw her, the air left my lungs. Emily Rhodes. 40 years older, her once dark hair now streaked with silver, lines etched into her face from a life lived without me. Yet her eyes were the same hazel eyes that had once looked at me like I was her whole world. "Danny," she said softly, sliding into the booth across from me. I almost laughed. "It's Daniel now," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. She smiled sadly. Of course. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clinking of dishes and murmurs of strangers filled the silence. Finally, she reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back before she could touch me. "I owe you an explanation," she began. "No," I said. "You owed me an explanation 40 years ago. Now you owe yourself the truth." Her lips trembled. She took a breath. "I was terrified, Daniel. My parents were pushing me, telling me I was too young, that you didn't have enough money, that I'd regret throwing my life away. And I believed them. The morning of the wedding, I panicked. I convinced myself I was saving us both from a mistake." I stared at her, my jaw tight. "And what about after? A phone call? A letter? Anything?" Her eyes filled with tears. I was ashamed. Every day I thought about reaching out, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. Then years turned into decades, and I told myself it was too late. Her words were like salt in an open wound. I leaned back in my seat, shaking my head. "Do you know what you did to me, Emily? You didn't just leave me at a church. You left me with questions that ate me alive. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. You turned me into a ghost in my own life." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I never stopped loving you, Daniel. I swear, not a day went by that I didn't regret what I did." I wanted to believe her. God, a part of me did, but another part, the older, harder part, knew that love without action is just a memory. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "The man you left, he's gone. He died on that altar 40 years ago. I became someone else. And the someone I became doesn't need your apology to move forward." Her tears spilled freely now. "Please, just tell me you forgive me." I hesitated. Forgiveness. That word had haunted me for decades. Did I forgive her? Could I? Finally, I said, "I don't hate you. I don't wish you pain. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't erase what you did. It just means I'm done carrying it. So yes, Emily, I forgive you, but not for you. For me." She nodded, her face crumpling, relief and sorrow mixing together. We sat there in silence for a long time, two strangers bound by a love story that never was. When I finally stood to leave, she reached for my hand again. This time, I let her hold it for a brief moment, just long enough to acknowledge what we had once shared. Then I pulled away. As I walked out of that cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in 40 years. Not closure exactly, but release. The weight I had carried since that wedding day had finally begun to lift. And I knew, as the autumn air hit my face, that I had taken the first step into a life that was truly mine. When I walked out of that cafe, the cool air of autumn hit my face, sharp and clean. The world looked the same, but something inside me had shifted. For 40 years, I had carried the ghost of Emily Rhodes with me. She had haunted every decision, every silence, every opportunity for love I turned away from. And in that moment, for the first time, since 1985, I felt her ghost begin to fade. Forgiveness is a strange thing. People think it's about setting the other person free, about handing them some gift they don't deserve. But standing there on that sidewalk, I realized forgiveness is about yourself. It's about putting down the weight someone else forced you to carry. I didn't forgive Emily so she could sleep better at night. I forgave her so I could finally breathe. That night, I went home and pulled out an old photo album my mother had made. There was a picture of me in my 20s standing with my family on the porch. My mother's arm was around me, my father's rare smile peeking through, and David, my brother, making a face to ruin the picture as always. And there was Emily, tucked into the frame, laughing at David's antics. For years, I couldn't even look at that photo. It hurt too much. But now, as I studied it, I felt something different. I didn't see betrayal anymore. I saw a young man who loved deeply, who believed in forever, who risked his heart without hesitation. And even though that story didn't end the way I wanted, I was proud of that young man. The truth is, I never found another great love. I never married, never had children. And for a long time I thought that made me broken. But sitting there with that photo, I realized my life wasn't empty, it was just different. I had my family, who stood by me when Emily didn't. I had my work, which gave me purpose. I had friends who shared laughter, neighbors who lent me their trust, and quiet evenings filled with books and music. Happiness doesn't always look like what you imagined. Sometimes it's smaller, quieter, but no less real. I thought about my mother, gone now, but whose words echoed in my heart, "Love doesn't vanish overnight." She was right. My love for Emily didn't vanish. It transformed. It became grief, then anger, then silence. And now, after all these years, it had finally become acceptance. My father, with his stoic lessons about finishing what you start, he would have told me I finally finished this chapter. And David, my brother, who never stopped trying to pull me back into the world, would probably laugh and say, "About time, Danny." The lesson I want to leave you with is simple. People will hurt you. Some wounds will take longer than others to heal. Some apologies will come too late. But don't let the pain define your entire story. Don't let the absence of someone else steal the presence of your own life. When Emily called, I realized something powerful. Closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. Closure comes from deciding you've had enough of the wait, from choosing to move forward even without answers. If you've ever been abandoned, betrayed, or left behind, hear this. You are not the sum of what someone else did to you. You are the choices you make afterward. You are the strength you discover when the world expects you to crumble. You are the love you give to those who stay. As for Emily, after that cafe, we never spoke again. She had her life, and I had mine. And though part of me will always wonder what might have been, I no longer live chained to that question. I live free. The man she left at the altar is gone. The man I became is standing here, finally at peace. And if there's one thing I can tell you after all of this, it's this. When someone walks out of your life, let them. Because the people who matter most are the ones who stay. That's my story. A story about love, loss, regret, and finally, release. If there's one thing I hope you take from it, it's this. Sometimes life doesn't give us the endings we wanted, but it always gives us the chance to write a new chapter. The man Emily left behind in 1985 is gone. The man I am today has learned that closure doesn't come from someone else's apology. It comes from within. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever carried a wound for years, only to finally let it go? Have you ever forgiven someone, not for them, but for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story touched you, if it made you think, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And don't forget to share this video with a friend or family member. You never know who might need a reminder that healing is possible, even decades later. And of course, if you'd like to hear more stories like this, true, raw, and filled with lessons for life, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss the next one. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening, and for letting this story into your heart. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, sometimes the greatest strength is learning to let go.